The wind howled through the towers of Storm's End, rain lashing against the stone like the gods themselves were mourning something. But inside the great hall, the flickering torches lit up celebration. Robert Baratheon had finally done what many had doubted he could. He had a true-born son. Not a shadow of doubt lingered in the realm this time. Born with a strong jaw, dark hair, and the Baratheon look so unmistakable, even the small folk whispered, "That one's truly the king's." They named him Demon Baratheon, a name whispered with both pride and caution. He was no docile princeling. By the age of 5, he'd already broken a knight's nose during training. By 10, he had the Red Keep's court split between those who feared him and those who followed him blindly. Cersei Lannister had smiled for the first time in years, not the sharp, venomous grin she wore like armor, but a genuine smile. For the first time, she didn't have to lie, didn't have to hide. Her son sat beside her on the Iron Throne during court, a lion's heart beating in a stag's chest, and yet power makes strange enemies. Ned Stark, the quiet wolf from the north, noticed it first. The boy was different, too cunning for his age, too aware. Demon watched the court not like a child learning, but like a ruler measuring worth. He didn't laugh like other children. He studied, he mimicked. He remembered slights, and paid them back, sometimes cruelly. When Ned visited King's Landing the spring after Jon Arryn's death, the death that still cast shadows over the throne, he saw how tightly Cersei clutched Daemon's future. She wasn't just raising a son. She was crafting a king, and not just any king, and a king with a lion's mind and a stag's rage. "Your son is sharp," Ned had told her one evening in the gardens, where the scent of blooming roses didn't quite hide the rot of secrets. Cersei smiled, sipping from her golden goblet. "Better a sharp king than a soft one. You know that better than anyone, Stark." But it wasn't Cersei Ned feared. It was the boy. He watched him train with Ser Barristan, argue laws with Pycelle, and challenge Varys with questions that made even the spider sweat. Daemon was a storm, wrapped in silk and steel. And Robert? The old warrior king had changed. Not much. He still drank, whored, and cursed, but when Daemon entered the room, Robert softened. He clapped the boy on the back, bragged of him in court, even stopped bedding whores for a month after Daemon called one of them a stain on mother's crown. In a realm used to bastards and backstabbing, a true-born heir should have been a blessing. But for the Lannisters, for the Starks, even for the schemers like Littlefinger and Varys, Daemon was an uncalculated variable. A prince raised in the shadow of lions and stags, taught to strike fast and rule hard. And in the alleys of Flea Bottom, rumors started. Rumors of a boy who watched executions with joy, a boy who kept ravens in cages, whispering to them secrets only Varys should know. A boy who, when asked what he wanted most in the world, answered, "To be feared." Daemon sat in the council chamber, smaller than the chairs, but somehow more imposing. The lords had started pretending they didn't notice the boy at meetings, but Daemon was always there, beside Cersei, sometimes behind Robert, listening. His fingers would tap on the table softly as they discussed gold grain or war. And more than once, Varys caught him mouthing the names of noble houses under his breath, memorizing alliances like a gambler learning the dice. It was Tyrion who saw the danger first, though he masked it in jest. A little lion Baratheon hybrid, Tyrion told Bronn one night over wine, too smart for his own good and too bold to be ignored. That one will either save the realm or burn it from the inside out. Bronn just shrugged. All boys dream of fire. It's the ones who figure out how to light it that worry me. Back at the Red Keep, Daemon was busy proving them all right. He had already taken over the training yard. Boys older than him feared being matched against him, because if they bested him, he would make them regret it later. Not with fists, but with favors denied, secrets whispered, or bruises that came from the shadows. If they let him win, he scorned them openly. He wanted challenge. He wanted war. One night, after a particularly bloody sparring match, Daemon stood alone overlooking Blackwater Bay. Jaime Lannister approached him, sword on hip, smirk on lips. "You fight like your father," Jaime said casually. "Robert was all fury when we were young, drunk on war. He was a hammer always swinging. No wonder your house chose that as its sigil." Demon didn't answer. He just stared out over the dark water. "You'll be king one day, if the gods are kind," Jaime added, though there was no warmth in the words. Demon turned. "And you'll still be the king's dog." Jaime's smirk flickered, but only for a second. "Sharp tongue for a boy, you should learn to keep it. Words can cut deeper than swords." "I know," Demon said. "That's why I use both." Jaime left him there in silence, shaken by something he couldn't explain. The boy didn't flinch before knights. He didn't laugh with children. His only true friend was Tommen, soft, kind and blind to Demon's darker thoughts. Even Joffrey, brash and cruel, avoided him now. The lion had learned that the stag cub had sharper antlers, but what disturbed Cersei most wasn't Demon's thirst for power. It was how well he played the game. He knew when to charm, when to flatter, and when to threaten. He'd once gotten Pycelle to fake a master's report, just by hinting he'd tell Robert about some long-forgotten debt to House Lannister. He'd befriended Sansa Stark not because he liked her, but because he wanted to learn about the North. He'd even sent gifts to Dorne, claiming it was a sign of respect. But really, it was to see if Prince Doran would respond, and how. He studied. People like Arya studied swordplay. Then came the day that shifted everything. A raven arrived from the Eyrie. Lysa Arryn had accused the Lannisters of murdering her husband, Jon Arryn, and she named Demon as one of the reasons. She claimed Jon had discovered something terrible about the boy, something that shook him before his death. Cersei's fingers trembled when she read the letter. Robert, furious, called for Ned Stark to come south. Again, just like the first time. But this time, the game had changed. Demon was older, sharper, more dangerous, and somewhere deep in the crypts below the Red Keep where Demon liked to wander alone, he sat beside the bones of kings long dead and whispered, "Let them come. Let them all come. I want to see what they'll do when I take everything they love." The raven reached Winterfell at dusk, black wings slicing through the golden sky. Ned Stark read the words in silence. Beside him, Catelyn watched his face grow colder, the lines on his brow deepening like fresh sword cuts. "He's calling me back," Ned finally muttered. "Robert wants me as hand. Again." He didn't mention the other part. The boy. The letter had only 3 lines about Demon, but they weighed more than the rest of the scroll. "The boy is not what he seems. He was Jon's fear. He might become our doom." It was signed by Lysa Arryn, a woman frayed at the edges, but not without truth in her madness. Catelyn placed a hand on his arm. "Will you go?" Ned looked at the fire, and in its flickering he saw shadows of dead kings, burnt cities, and the look in Robert's eyes the day he'd raised his hammer against Rhaegar. "I must," he said softly. "For Robert, for the realm, and maybe for the boy." When he arrived in King's Landing a week later, the city had changed. There were more guards on the walls. Lannister gold flashed more openly in the streets. The small folk whispered the prince's name with both awe and fear, and Demon, now 12, greeted Ned like a grown man. He stood tall in the throne room, flanked by knights, robed in deep black and crimson, looking more like a crowned king than a royal child. "Lord Stark," he said, voice steady, "too calm for someone his age. My father speaks of you often. He says you're the only man he trusts." Ned bowed slightly. "Your Grace?" Demon's eyes flickered. "Not yet." "Soon enough," Ned answered, and both of them understood the tension between the lines. They circled each other that day, polite words masking a silent war of instincts. Demon studied Ned like a hawk sizing up a direwolf. Ned, in turn, saw too much of Tywin in the boy. Calculated, proud and worse, patient. That night, Ned walked the halls of the Red Keep, memories crashing into him like waves. He saw the ghosts of old friends, old enemies. Jon Arryn, Lyanna, Robert, when he was still a man of fire and purpose, and, in the shadows he heard whispers, Demon was building something, a private network of boys from the streets, spies from the kitchens, even scepters from the Great Sept. Some said he paid in secrets, not gold. Others swore he had a book of names, and when he opened it, people disappeared. Then, 3 days later, the first crack in the facade appeared. A stable boy was found dead near the Blackwater, his throat slit. Officially, it was called a robbery. Unofficially, Varys told Ned, the boy had been caught trying to smuggle a letter out of the city, a letter meant for Stannis Baratheon. The message that Daemon was not like his father, that he had plans for Dragonstone, that he'd spoken of forming his own Kingsguard, not of 7 but of 13, and that he had dreams of rebuilding something lost, something ancient. Ned cornered Robert in the royal gardens the next morning. The king was drunk, red-faced, but not yet deaf to reason. "Your son," Ned said firmly, "is dangerous." Robert laughed bitterly. "Of course he is. He's my son. The realm is full of vipers. I need a dragon to keep them in line." "He's more lion than dragon," Ned said. "And he's building an army of shadows." Robert stood, fury returning to his voice. "Don't speak of my son like he's a monster." "He's not a monster yet," Ned warned, "but if you let Cersei shape him, he'll become one." For a heartbeat, Robert looked shaken, not by Ned's words, but by the fear that maybe, just maybe, he already knew it. That night Cersei visited Daemon's chambers. She found her son sharpening a dagger, calm, focused. "You were careless," she said. Daemon didn't look up. He deserved it. He betrayed me. He was a boy. He was a spy. She walked over and took the dagger from his hands. "You must learn to be subtle." Daemon finally looked up at her, eyes like storm clouds. "No, I must learn to be king." The morning after the stable boy's death, silence lingered in the halls of the Red Keep like a fog that refused to lift. Servants spoke in hushed tones. Lords moved cautiously, unsure where to place their loyalties. Something had shifted. The game was no longer between lions and wolves. It was between an old king losing his grip and a boy learning to squeeze. Daemon sat by the window of the Tower of the Hand, legs swinging idly as he stared down at the courtyard below. "Lord Stark is honourable," he muttered to himself, "but honour blinds. That's his weakness." He turned to the shadow standing beside the door, a boy younger than him with dirt-streaked cheeks and quick, watchful eyes. One of his whisper runners from Flea Bottom. "Tell Rick to watch the kitchens. If Pycelle meets with Stark again, I want to know what was said before the food's even cold." The boy nodded and disappeared into the dark, like a shadow vanishing. At sunrise, Daemon knew he had to move faster. Ned Stark wasn't like the others. He didn't play for favor or coin. He played for truth. And truth, Daemon realized, was the one thing that could kill him faster than a blade. At court, Robert began slipping more often into silence. His voice no longer roared. His steps grew heavy. He drank deeper, stayed in bed longer, and started confusing names. Once he called Daemon Rhaegar and didn't even notice. Cersei noticed. She summoned Grand Maester Pycelle, ordered stronger herbs for sleep, and then stronger ones to keep the king on his feet. But nothing worked for long. The king was rotting from the inside, and the vultures could smell it. Littlefinger began whispering that a regency council might be needed, just until the boy is of age. Varys warned that Daenerys had married a Dothraki horse lord and might be riding west with fire at her heels. And Renly? Renly just smiled more and said less. He had that dangerous look of a man who knew a secret worth killing for. But Daemon wasn't distracted. He'd already chosen his battlefield. One evening, while the court was busy hosting a feast in honor of the visiting Martells, Daemon walked into the rookery and handed a sealed scroll to Maester Luwin. "No sigil, no return," he said. "Send it by Raven, north to the wall." Luwin hesitated. "To Lord Commander Mormont?" Daemon shook his head. "To the bastard, Jon Snow." By the time Luwin realized what he'd just done, the boy was gone. Down in the crypts beneath the Red Keep, Daemon returned to the dusty corridors only he seemed to enjoy. He lit a single torch, held it high, and stared at the skulls of dead Targaryen kings. He whispered names to them: Aegon the Conqueror, Maegor the Cruel, Daemon Blackfire. The air was cold, but Daemon didn't shiver. "I will not be forgotten. Not like the rest." Above ground, Ned Stark received his own letter. This one from Stannis, sealed in black wax, written in Stannis's sharp, joyless hand. It confirmed his worst fears, and more. Stannis wrote, "Daemon, is more than air. He is the seed of prophecy, a whisper of dragons in a boy's blood. I do not trust him. You should not either. But mark my words, Cersei and the boy will not let Robert rule long, nor will they let you live if you speak." Ned folded the letter, hands stiff. He went to Robert that night. "You must name your heir," he said. Robert, half drunk and distant, muttered, "I already have, Demon." Ned pressed, "You must name him now, in writing, before others." Robert blinked slowly. "Do you not trust me, Ned?" Ned didn't answer, and that silence said everything. That night, Demon stood in the shadows of the small council chamber and watched the lords argue. He watched his mother manipulate, his father decay, and his uncle Renly plant quiet seeds of doubt. He realized the truth of it. He wouldn't inherit the crown. He would have to take it. The storm finally broke, not in the sky, but in the Red Keep. It started with a feast, a grand one meant to honor Demon's 12th name day. Lords from across the Crownlands arrived. Lannister colors flew proudly. Baratheon horns echoed in the streets. But beneath the silver platters and golden goblets, poison was being served in the form of whispers, sidelong glances, and sharpened ambitions. Demon sat at the high table beside his father, towering in black velvet and gold. The crown sat loosely on Robert's brow, sliding to the side as the king laughed too loud and drank too much. Across the hall, Ned Stark's gaze stayed fixed on Demon. Cersei, seated between them like a lioness watching two prey circle each other, knew war was coming. She could feel it in her bones, but she hadn't counted on Demon moving before she gave the word. That night, after the wine was drained and the bards dismissed, Ned found a scroll waiting in his chambers. No sigil, no signature, just one line. The crown is not given, it is taken. The next morning, Robert was found collapsed in the royal hunting lodge, bleeding from a wild boar's tusk, but the wound was too clean, too precise, too convenient. Cersei wept, of course, loudly, publicly, and within the hour Sir Barristan Selmy announced that King Robert lay dying, and his will must be read immediately. Demon stood outside the king's bedchamber, hands clasped behind his back, lips pressed tight. He said nothing. He didn't need to. His eyes told the whole story. It's happening now. Inside the room, Ned read the parchment slowly. Robert's will, freshly inked and shaky, named "My rightful heir and Trueborn son, Demon of House Baratheon, as regent until he came of age and hand." In the meantime, Ned's jaw clenched. He turned to Robert, pale and sweating in bed. "You wrote this?" he asked quietly. Robert gave a weak nod. "Keep him safe, Ned. Make him a better king than I was." But Ned couldn't promise that. Not with what he knew. Not with what Stannis had written. Not with what he'd seen in Demon's eyes. He left the room with the weight of 1,000 swords on his back. Within the hour, he summoned Peter Baelish. "I need the city watch," Ned said. "When Robert dies, there will be a fight for the throne. Demon's claim may be lawful, but the realm will bleed if he takes it by fear." Baelish smiled. "Lawful claims don't matter. Perception does. And right now, Demon has gold, steel, and blood on his side." "What do you have, honor?" Ned said. Baelish laughed. "Then you've already lost." But Ned had made his choice. He summoned Renly, spoke quietly with Varys, and wrote a raven to Stannis, urging him to come south with proof and men. He even prepared to take Demon into custody, not to kill, but to remove from Cersei's grip. He planned to do it the next morning. But that night, everything burned. The bells rang before dawn. The gold cloaks were in motion, not for Ned's command, but for Demon's. Baelish had betrayed him. Ned Stark was arrested in the throne room, surrounded by Demon's newly forged 13. Young knights, old sellswords, even 2 sellsail, captains from Lys, and there Demon stood, not hiding behind his mother, not flinching behind his father's crown. He wore no armor. Just a dark cloak and a small brooch, the stag and lion entwined. "You sought to steal my crown," Demon said, voice cold and smooth. "But you never understood. The throne isn't protected by swords. It's protected by fear." "You're still a boy," Ned hissed. "And when you rule with fear, you breed rebellion." Demon stepped forward. "Then let them rebel." Cersei watched silently from the shadows. She hadn't ordered the arrest. That had been Daemon. Her son no longer asked permission, and in that moment, she understood. She hadn't raised a king. She had unleashed a conqueror. The snow had begun to fall early on the wall that year. The cold bit through fur and bone alike, a creeping reminder that winter wasn't waiting for politics or kings. It was coming regardless. Jon Snow stood on the edge of Castle Black's great wooden walkway, eyes cast south, where the wind carried only silence. Ghost sat by his feet, unnaturally still. He hadn't spoken of the letter to anyone. Daemon's raven had arrived in the night, black wings beating against the snow-streaked sky like a bad omen. Jon had read it 3 times under candlelight. The boy had written carefully, not with warmth but with something colder than steel, something honest. We are blood, though you were cast to the cold. My mother will never accept you, but I will. Come south. Stand beside me. The world is changing, and I will not leave a wolf in the snow when it could be running through the halls of power. Jon didn't trust him, but he couldn't ignore him either. Daemon knew things. Too many. Things only someone with ears in places they shouldn't be could have known. Mentions of Ned's arrest, of a looming war between houses, of a plan already in motion to break the realm into pieces and rebuild it in the shape of a Baratheon Lannister boy's vision. Jon burned a letter in the fire, but the word stayed. Meanwhile, the realm trembled. In the north, Robb Stark stood in the great hall of Winterfell. His father's capture a thunderclap that cracked his boyhood in half. Maester Luwin laid out the facts calmly. Ned was to be tried for treason. Cersei had declared Daemon heir and Lord Protector. The crown now claimed that Stannis and Renly were traitors, and any who supported them would be crushed. Robb clenched his fists. Then we'll ride, the bannermen answered, Karstark, Umber, Glover. The wolves were on the move. In Dragonstone, Stannis read Ned's final raven with his jaw locked tight. He knew, he told Ser Davos. He knew the boy was wrong for the realm. That's why they silenced him, Davos frowned. What do we do now? We light the fire, Stannis said, and walked to the chamber where Melisandre waited, her red eyes glowing in the dark. In King's Landing, Daemon's grip tightened by the hour. The 13 patrolled the streets, golden cloaks replaced with black and crimson. The poor were fed, but only those who praised the prince publicly. The whispers in Flea Bottom were watched, and traitors, and real or imagined, began disappearing. Cersei found herself edged out slowly from her own son's court. The boy who had once clung to her robes now met with lords alone. He spoke to the Iron Bank by Raven. He summoned ravens from Oldtown. He even had Tyrion removed from council under the excuse of mockery and treason. You needed me once, Tyrion told Daemon before leaving the capital. But you've outgrown your leash. I wonder if you'll enjoy your own bark when the wolves come. Daemon didn't blink. The wolves are already howling. Let them come. I'll skin them all the same. Cersei approached her son that night. You must slow down, she urged. You've taken too much too quickly. You're making enemies. I was born into a world that hated me before I took a breath, Daemon said, standing at the Iron Throne, staring into its jagged steel. I don't want their love. I want their obedience. And if they don't give it? His hand touched the hilt of a ceremonial sword on the throne's arm. Then I'll remind them what a king is. Cersei saw it now. Not a boy with dreams of glory, but a storm wrapped in flesh. A wildfire with a crown. And across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen stepped into the ashes of Khal Drogo's funeral pyre, dragons screaming in the night. Her fire, too, had only just begun. The world was about to burn on every side. And Daemon, Baratheon? He planned to be the last flame standing. The banners of the north marched beneath grey skies, wolves snarling on their flags as if echoing the fury of those who carried them. Robb Stark rode at the head of the column, his face still too young for war, but his eyes too old for peace. The Riverlands had already begun to burn. Tywin Lannister, answering his grandson's rise, struck hard and fast along the trident. Punishing the bannermen who dared to call for Ned's release, Robb didn't ride for peace, he rode for his father, for justice, and maybe, somewhere deep beneath the armor, for vengeance. The raven from King's Landing had delivered the final blow. Ned Stark has confessed to treason. His life has been spared by mercy of Prince Daemon, under condition of exile to the Night's Watch. He rides for the wall under guard. Robb read those words 10 times, then burned them. He didn't believe his father had truly confessed, not unless they'd forced it. And Daemon's mercy rang hollow. No prince offered mercy when he had justice in his hand. They marched. Faster after that. In the east, Daenerys stood beside the smoking bones of her dragons, still so small but very much alive. She had heard whispers through traders of a boy king in Westeros, a Baratheon, young and cruel, ruling through fear. She had laughed at first. A boy king? The realm has grown small in its ambition. But Ser Jorah shook his head. Not small, desperate. She looked into the flames that night and asked the fire what the boy's name meant. It didn't answer in words, only in images. Steel, blood, a throne drowning in shadow. Back in King's Landing, Daemon stood in the throne, room alone. Robert's funeral had been quiet. No grand parades, no weeping nobles. Only fire and ash in the sept and silence from his son. Daemon had not cried. He had not bowed. He had simply taken his seat on the Iron Throne and stared out at the court, that now watched him the way one watches a coiled viper. He began issuing decrees like thunderclaps. No noble house may raise private armies without approval from the crown. All debts owed to the Iron Bank were to be paid within a year. All ravens entering or leaving the capital would be inspected. Tyrion, now hiding in the Vale, called him a prince with paranoia in his blood and a dagger behind every word. Varys, still in the capital, watched quietly. He knew Daemon was no fool. He was something worse, brilliant, and when word came that Robb Stark had crossed the neck, Daemon didn't panic. He smiled. "Let him come," he told Cersei, one of his 13. "The boy wolf thinks he fights a lion. He doesn't know he's running into a storm." But the truth was, Daemon felt it too, the tightening coil. Every day, the war grew closer. Every day, the court fractured more. Renly had declared himself king in Highgarden, rallying the Tyrells behind his charm and his crown by claim. Stannis prepared to sail from Dragonstone, his warships building under the shadow of fire priests. And in the north, the wildlings stirred restlessly. Jon Snow had received word of his father's exile and stood now at a precipice he never expected. Maester Aemon watched him quietly one morning. "You've not slept," the old man said. Jon looked up. "He's alive, my father, but they sent him here in chains." "And you think of leaving?" Jon didn't answer. He didn't need to. Maester Aemon nodded slowly. "The blood of kings flows in you, but so does the duty of the watch." "That boy," Jon muttered, eyes burning. "Daemon. He would offer me a throne one day if I knelt. I can feel it, but I don't trust it." "Good," Aemon said, eyes glittering, "because the ones who offer thrones rarely deserve them." In the end, Jon made no promise. But that night, Ghost was gone from his room, and by dawn, so was Jon. Daemon heard of this through Varys days later. "The bastard has left the wall," Varys said, expression unreadable. "They say he rides south alone." Daemon turned from the map of Westeros he'd been studying. "Good," he murmured. "Let the north send its ghosts. I'll show them what kind of king I am." The war came not with horns and banners, but with smoke and silence. Robb Stark crossed the Trident under cover of night, splitting his forces with brutal precision. The Lannisters expected thunder. Instead, they got knives in the dark. Jaime was captured at Whispering Wood. Tywin fell back to Harrenhal, the Riverlands aflame with rebellion. The North had arrived not as scattered wolves, but as a pack. King's Landing braced itself. Refugees from the Reach flooded in, whispering of Renly's green banners, of a self-proclaimed king charming nobles with smiles and lies. Stannis' ships were sighted near Blackwater Bay, and Daemon did not flinch. He summoned the small council, what remained of it, Pycelle, still trembling, Varys, calm and ever watching, and Ser Call, who had now become his shadow. "Let them come," he said again, but this time his voice had a tremor, not of fear but something worse, excitement. "We will burn them all if we must." Varys tilted his head. "You'd burn your own kingdom to keep a throne?" "I'd burn it to build a new one," Daemon snapped. In the dungeons below the Red Keep, Ned Stark sat chained in a damp cell, his beard now grey, his eyes dulled but still firm. His exile had never come. Daemon had delayed it, lied, stalled. The truth, Ned now realized, was simple. The boy never intended to send him north. One evening, Daemon came down alone. No guards, just him. He stood outside Ned's cell and said nothing for a long time. Ned finally spoke. "You're not your father." Daemon's lips curled faintly. "Good." He was a man. Flawed, angry, but still a man. You're something else." "I'm what this realm made me," Daemon whispered. "Born in the shadow of lies, raised by fear, and taught by those who smile with knives behind their backs." "You don't have to become the monster they expect," Ned said, voice calm. "But what if I already am?" Daemon murmured. "What if that's the only way to survive?" He left without another word, and Ned knew the boy wasn't seeking redemption. He was seeking justification. The next day the court gathered. Black and gold banners hung heavy in the throne room. Whispers filled the air like flies. Eddard Stark was brought forward, bound in chains, pale but proud. Daemon sat the iron throne, one leg lazily draped over the other. A crown, not Robert's, but one of his own design, sharp, jagged, like it had been forged in battle, not peace. "Lord Eddard Stark," he said loudly, voice echoing, "you stand accused of treason, conspiracy, and betrayal of the crown. What say you?" Ned looked around the hall. Some faces were cold, some ashamed. Cersei stood beside the throne, silent. Tommen watched, confused. Joffrey smirked, hungry. Sansa sobbed in silence, and Arya, God's helper, was nowhere to be seen. "I say," Ned said slowly, "that if you do this, there will be no peace left to rule." Daemon leaned forward. "Then let there be war." He gave the signal, and Ser Ilyn drew his sword. But before it could fall, not before the final stroke of fire could burn away the last thread of mercy, a cry rang out. "Wait!" The doors burst open. A rider, cloaked in snow and black, stepped into the hall. Jon Snow. He looked older, sharper. The cold still clung to him. Ghost padded beside him, red eyes locked on Daemon. The court froze. Even Daemon seemed struck, not by surprise but curiosity. "Jon Snow," he said, standing. "The bastard comes home." "I come for my father," Jon said, voice flat, "and for the truth." Daemon smiled. "You're too late for both." Jon took another step. "If you kill him, you'll lose everything." "I have nothing to lose," Daemon whispered. "And nothing left to fear." Then he gave the nod. The sword fell. Ned Stark's head hit the marble. Jon didn't scream, didn't cry. His hands didn't tremble. He simply lowered his eyes. Ghost howled once, a long, shattering sound that cracked through the heart of the Red Keep. The war that followed made all others seem small. Robb took the twins with blood. Renly died to a shadow. Stannis burned his enemies, but not the boy. And Jon? Jon disappeared. Some said he returned to the Wall. Others claimed he joined Daenerys across the sea. A few whispered he vanished into the woods beyond Winterfell, waiting for the crown to slip, waiting for Daemon to bleed. Daemon Baratheon ruled for years. He rebuilt the court, the laws, the army. But he never smiled, never trusted, never forgot the eyes of the boy who walked into his court and watched his father die. And in his darkest nights, when sleep refused him, Daemon would ask the shadows, "What would I be if he had knelt?" But no answer ever came, only silence, and the weight of a throne bought with fear.